The Galactic Council sat in solemn silence within the vast, dimly lit chamber, each representative from the galaxy's most powerful species anxiously awaiting the decision that would shape the future of Earth. For eons, the Council had governed countless worlds, ensuring peace and order across the galaxy. They were accustomed to mediating disputes, managing trade, and occasionally dealing with rogue species that threatened the greater galactic order. But this was different. The HFY, a brutal and war-hungry species, had declared their intention to invade Earth, a planet that was little more than a primitive backwater by galactic standards. The Council had anticipated many things, but this was something none of them had expected. Why Earth? A sleek, silver-skinned Aranax delegate asked, his voice laced with both confusion and curiosity. His species was known for its intellect, and the HFY's choice of Earth seemed illogical, even to those who had no love for humanity. "It is not the planet," said Commander Excelcor of the HFY, his reptilian eyes glowing a soft red. He stood tall and menacing, an imposing figure draped in a black battle uniform. "It is the humans themselves. We seek to break their spirit, show them their place in the galaxy. They are weak, undisciplined, and unworthy of existence. A perfect test for our might." The room fell into uneasy silence. The other delegates, from the insectoid civics to the shimmering Quellians, exchanged uncertain glances. It was one thing to invade a helpless world, but to provoke such a species into war. Even the HFY's reputation for merciless invasions seemed to pale in comparison to the madness of this plan. A tall figure, towering over the others, stood up. This was Grand Counselor Andara, a being of ancient and terrifying power. Her species, the Athali, had watched over the galaxy for millennia. Andara was not one to speak often, but when she did, the entire council listened. "Excelcor, this is reckless," she said, her voice cool and measured. "You are inviting chaos. We cannot simply ignore the possibility that Earth might defend itself. You risk the stability of the entire galaxy if humanity retaliates." Her words hung heavily in the air. Zelkor's expression remained stoic. "The humans are unprepared. They have no technology capable of matching ours, no military might that can stand against the Shakar war machine. You've seen the reports. Their defense forces are laughable. We will crush them in weeks, perhaps days. Yet you have failed to explain why we must intervene." A Quellian diplomat said, his silvery skin shimmering as he tilted his head, perplexed. "We should leave them to their fate." Others nodded in agreement, though there were some who felt uneasy about the idea of ignoring a war, especially one involving a species with so much potential. The Aranax representative, still concerned, spoke again. "If the humans surprise you, if they fight back in ways you've not anticipated, what then?" he asked. Zelkor's lips curled into a sly smile. "Then we will crush them harder." Andara's eyes narrowed. "We will monitor this invasion closely. If the HFY fail to bring Earth to its knees as easily as you believe, the Council will intervene. But if they succeed, we will do nothing. Earth is not our concern." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. With that, the matter was decided. The HFY would proceed with their invasion, and the rest of the galaxy would watch, unsure of what to make of it all. The Council had spoken. The fate of Earth was now in the hands of one species alone. As the Council session ended and the delegates began to depart, a quiet unease settled over the chamber. Not all of them believed the HFY would win so easily. Some wondered if they were making a grave mistake by underestimating humanity. Back on Earth, the humans had no idea what awaited them. But the invasion was coming, and it would change everything. The HFY fleet arrived without warning, their massive ships tearing through Earth's atmosphere with the ferocity of a storm. In the span of just a few hours, their invasion force had established a blockade around the planet, effectively cutting off communication with the outside world. The ships, each one larger than any human-built structure, hung ominously in the sky like dark, silent giants. They were an intimidating sight, a reminder that humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and that their very survival was now at the mercy of an alien race. On the ground, chaos erupted. Governments scrambled to respond, but their efforts were in vain. Military forces, despite their best efforts, were completely outmatched. The HFY's weapons were far more advanced than anything Earth had ever seen. Plasma cannons melted through the strongest defenses, and their warships unleashed devastating bombardments on major cities from orbit. The damage was catastrophic. Entire metropolitan areas were reduced to rubble within hours. The world was thrown into disarray, with panic spreading like wildfire. But even in the face of certain annihilation, humanity did not give in. Amid the madness, scattered pockets of resistance began to form. Civilians, ordinary people with no military training, took up arms. They fought in the streets, barricading their homes, refusing to let their cities fall without a fight. Soldiers, too, rallied together, joining forces with scientists and engineers to develop countermeasures against the invaders. The world may have been stunned by the sheer scale of the attack, but Earth was not going down without a struggle. News reports flashed across the globe, showing the devastation wrought by the HFY. Governments declared martial law, and emergency evacuation plans were put into place. People fled to underground bunkers, trying to escape the relentless bombardment from above. But even as the alien fleet loomed over Earth like a dark cloud, there was a glimmer of hope. Among the chaos, human ingenuity began to shine. People who had never held a weapon before now found themselves standing tall, ready to defend their homes, their families, and their way of life. At the United Nations, the world's leaders gathered in a secure underground facility, discussing their options. The room was filled with tension. No one had ever faced an invasion like this before. Earth's military forces were scattered, many cities already lost, and the HFY had shown no mercy. The President of the United States, standing at the front of the room, addressed the assembly. "We may be outmatched," he said, his voice steady but laced with determination. "But we are not defeated. We are not just a species of soldiers. We are survivors. We've survived the darkest days in our history, and we will survive this." His words carried weight, but doubt lingered in the eyes of many. The situation was dire. The HFY were unstoppable, and even with Earth's best efforts, the odds seemed insurmountable. Yet there was something in those words, something primal, that ignited a spark within every person in the room. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and had come out victorious. This time, though, it wasn't just about one nation's survival. It was about the survival of an entire planet. Back in the streets, the resistance grew. Groups of soldiers and civilians began to coordinate, striking back with guerrilla tactics, using the aliens' own weapons against them when possible. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The HFY might have more advanced technology, but humanity had something they hadn't accounted for: the will to fight. In every city, in every corner of the world, ordinary people stood up. They may not have known how to win, but they knew one thing: they would never let their world fall without a fight. And though Earth was being torn apart, humanity's refusal to surrender sent a clear message to the invaders. Earth wasn't just a target, it was a challenge. The HFY had underestimated them, and in doing so, they had just awoken something they never expected. This section builds tension and sets the stage for humanity's defiance. The focus is on how humanity, despite the overwhelming odds, begins to fight back, showing that the HFY may have underestimated the human spirit. The narrative shows the initial devastation of Earth, but leaves the reader with a sense of hope, as humanity refuses to give in. The first days of the HFY invasion had been a brutal shock to humanity. In the wake of the initial bombardments, most of the world's major cities lay in ruins, and Earth's military forces were scattered, overwhelmed by the sheer might of the alien war machine. It seemed like there was no hope, no chance for survival. Yet in the chaos, Humanity found something far more valuable than advanced technology or superior firepower: their unbreakable will to survive. It started with small, uncoordinated acts of defiance. A handful of soldiers, untrained civilians, and scientists began to band together, forming pockets of resistance. They attacked the alien supply lines, disrupted communications, and launched guerrilla raids in the shattered streets. It was far from organized, but it was enough to slow down the HFY's relentless advance. Amid the rubble, a small group of human engineers and military leaders had secretly begun working on a solution. They had no illusions about the state of Earth's technology. Humanity was far behind the HFY in almost every regard. But they also knew something the invaders didn't. Earth's strength didn't lie in the size of their weapons, but in their creativity, resourcefulness, and ability to adapt under pressure. If they were going to win, they would have to outthink the enemy. Dr. Samuel Carter, a brilliant scientist and one of the leaders of the human resistance, stood in a makeshift lab, reviewing the data on a monitor. He was exhausted, but there was a fierce determination in his eyes. "We've done it," he said, barely able to contain the excitement in his voice. "The prototype is ready." The weapon they had developed wasn't like anything the HFY had ever encountered. It was a hybrid of human ingenuity and scavenged alien technology, a fusion of Earth's best minds working with the fragments of the invaders' machines. Using the HFY's own energy weapons, they had built a device capable of disabling the alien ships with a single strike. It wasn't perfect, and it was still untested, but it was humanity's best hope. Commander Lisa Chan, a former military strategist who now led a battalion of resistance fighters, stood beside Dr. Carter, nodding approvingly. "It's a start, but we need a plan. The HFY aren't going to sit around and wait for us to catch up. We need to strike hard and fast." They both understood that this weapon could be the turning point in the war, but it wasn't enough to simply have the technology. They needed to get close to the HFY ships, and they needed to do it without being detected. Earth's remaining military forces, despite their lack of advanced weapons, had experienced the HFY didn't expect. They knew their terrain better than the invaders did and had a strategic advantage in the cities and forests of Earth. It was this advantage that would allow them to infiltrate the alien lines. Over the following days, resistance cells from around the world coordinated their efforts. Each group had their own role. Some would sabotage HFY energy sources, others would harass the alien patrols, and a few would create diversions to allow the main strike force to get through. It was a long shot, but it was the only plan they had. Earth's forces would need to move swiftly and unpredictably if they were going to catch the HFY off guard. As the resistance mobilized, the HFY began to feel the pressure. Their forces were still vastly superior. But for the first time since the invasion began, they had to consider that Earth might not fall as easily as they had predicted. Reports from the front lines spoke of human ingenuity, booby traps, makeshift weapons, and tactics that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. The HFY commanders were beginning to wonder if they had underestimated their enemy. In one of the remaining human strongholds, deep beneath a ruined city, the first test of the new weapon took place. Dr. Carter, surrounded by a team of engineers and military officers, activated the device. A beam of energy shot out, striking the nearby HFY scout ship. The ship shimmered, then faltered, its systems momentarily shutting down. A cheer broke out among the resistance soldiers who had gathered to witness the test. It worked. But it wasn't just about the weapon. It was about the message it sent. The HFY might have thought humanity was weak, easy to crush, but now they knew better. The humans weren't giving up. They were adapting, learning, and fighting back with everything they had. The invaders had awoken a sleeping giant, and it was angry. As the days passed, Earth's resistance grew stronger, more organized. The initial desperation had transformed into something far more dangerous, a unified force that no one, not even the HFY, had anticipated. The world's fragmented groups of survivors, once caught up in their own struggles to stay alive, now came together to form a global resistance. In cities where the HFY had crushed humanity's military, pockets of resistance fighters began striking back, using their intimate knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. In the ruined streets of New York, a group of former soldiers, engineers, and civilians had begun using guerrilla tactics to disrupt the alien forces. They attacked supply convoys, sabotaged communication lines, and harassed Shakar patrols. Every attack, though small, served as a reminder that the humans they had underestimated were still capable of inflicting damage. The HFY, accustomed to swift victories, were growing frustrated. The more they pushed, the harder humanity fought back. One evening, Commander Lisa Chung gathered her team in the remains of an old skyscraper overlooking the wreckage of a once bustling city. The hum of distant firefights echoed in the air as she addressed her team. The HFY may think they have us cornered, but we know this city better than they ever will. It's time we start taking the fight to them. Chang's voice was sharp, confident. Her team, a mix of hardened soldiers and skilled civilians, nodded. They had already launched several successful attacks, but this mission was different. Their goal wasn't just sabotage. It was to send a message. We know where the HFY are storing their weapons, Chang continued. If we hit that supply depot tonight, we'll cripple their ability to launch attacks in this sector. We'll show them they can't control us. The resistance soldiers prepped their gear in silence, each member focused on the mission ahead. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming their home. The human spirit, when pushed to the brink, could adapt, improvise, and overcome, something the HFY had failed to understand. As night fell, the resistance fighters moved swiftly through the city, using the shadows and abandoned buildings to cover their approach. The HFY had set up a heavily guarded weapons depot in the heart of the city, but the humans knew the layout better than anyone. They knew where the patrols would be, where the weak points in the perimeter were, and where to strike to cause the most damage. The first explosion was quiet, a small precision charge that took out the power grid to the depot. Within moments, the area was plunged into darkness, and the HFY soldiers scrambled, their usual confidence shattered by the sudden loss of control. The humans moved in quickly, using the disarray to their advantage. They struck from all sides, overwhelming the surprised guards with speed and precision. The HFY had never seen anything like it. Human soldiers fought with a tenacity they couldn't predict. By the time the HFY realized what was happening, it was too late. The weapons depot had been breached, and the explosives planted by the resistance tore through the facility, igniting a massive chain reaction. The sound of the explosion rang out across the city, sending shockwaves through the invaders. The depot was destroyed, and with it, a critical part of the HFY's supply chain. As the team made their escape, they couldn't help but feel a rush of exhilaration. For the first time in weeks, they had scored a significant victory. They weren't just defending their cities anymore. They were pushing back. But the fight wasn't over. The HFY would retaliate, of course. They had underestimated humanity before, but now they knew better. Earth wasn't going to fall as easily as they had thought. The resistance had just begun, and the invaders were about to learn that the humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their very existence. Meanwhile, the HFY, far from their base on Earth, sat in their command center, analyzing the aftermath of the raid. The attack on their depot wasn't just a minor inconvenience. It was a statement. The humans had proven they could strike back in ways the invaders hadn't predicted. And now, the HFY knew that Earth was not just a planet to conquer. It was a challenge they were going to have to face head-on. The victory in New York sent ripples of hope through Earth's resistance, but it also sparked something far darker. The HFY, known for their merciless retaliation, wasted no time in responding. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and fight back, and now their pride had been wounded. The alien commanders, seething with anger, began to devise a counterattack that would put an end to the resistance once and for all. Commander Excelcor, leader of the HFY invasion, watched the reports of the failed attack in his war room, his red eyes burning with fury. "They have learned nothing," he hissed, slamming a fist onto the control panel. "We will show them that their defiance will only lead to more suffering." His subordinates, a group of ruthless Shakar strategists, began discussing their options. One suggested a full planetary bombardment to obliterate Earth's remaining defenses. But Selkir knew that such an action could destroy valuable resources and delay their conquest. Instead, he had another, more personal plan in mind, one that would not only crush the resistance, but also make an example out of humanity for anyone else who dared challenge the Ekshakar. "Send the Wraiths," Zelkor ordered coldly. The Wraiths were elite soldiers, known for their viciousness and stealth. They had never failed to eliminate an enemy, no matter how formidable. "Target their leaders. Show them what happens when they defy us." The Wraiths, handpicked from the fiercest Shakar warriors, were a force of nature. They moved through the shadows, striking swiftly and silently, leaving only devastation in their wake. Their task was simple: find and destroy the leaders of the human resistance, cripple the movement's command structure, and send a message that the Ekshakar would not tolerate rebellion. On Earth, the resistance was not idle. After the successful raid on the Ekshakar's weapon depot, the leaders of the resistance, Commander Lisa Chung, Dr. Samuel Carter, and others, began planning their next moves. They knew the aliens would retaliate, but the success of their recent operations had bolstered their resolve. Earth was not going to be an easy conquest. The resistance had gathered in a hidden underground facility in the Rocky Mountains, far from the reach of the alien forces. It was here that they devised their next major attack. Their goal was to disrupt the Shakar's communications network, preventing them from coordinating their forces effectively. But they were acutely aware that this next operation would be their most dangerous yet. "We can't keep running guerrilla attacks forever," Lisa Chung said, pacing the war room. "We need to hit them where it hurts, where they won't expect it. But we need to be prepared for the consequences." Dr. Carter, sitting at a table covered in schematics, raised his eyes. "We've been making progress with our technology. If we can create a more powerful version of the weapon we used in New York, we might be able to disable their entire fleet, at least for long enough to take the fight to their command centers." Lisa nodded, her face hardening with determination. "Then we do it. We hit them hard. And we hit them now. We show them that humanity is not a species to be taken lightly." But they were unaware of the storm that was already gathering. The Ekshakar Wraiths had been dispatched, their stealth ships gliding undetected through Earth's atmosphere. Their mission was clear: eliminate the leadership of the resistance. As they descended towards the mountains, they cloaked their ships, blending into the shadows of the night. The resistance had no idea what was coming. Hours later, deep within the underground facility, a series of low hums echoed through the walls. The Wraiths had arrived. In the blink of an eye, the first of the elite soldiers infiltrated the base, moving silently through the corridors. They were everywhere, striking without warning, cutting down resistance fighters in a flash. It was an ambush, swift and deadly. The resistance, unprepared for such a focused assault, fought back with everything they had, but the Wraiths were too fast, too lethal. Within moments, the facility was in chaos. Lisa Chung, along with Dr. Carter and a few remaining soldiers, rushed to the central command room, hoping to mount a defense. But they were too late. The Wraiths had already breached the inner sanctum. The battle for Earth's survival had just entered its most dangerous phase. As the human resistance fought for their lives, the message from the Ekshakar was clear. Humanity had dared to rise against the invaders, but they would soon learn the true cost of defiance. The underground facility was in ruins. The sound of gunfire and explosions reverberated through the halls as the human resistance fought desperately to hold their ground against the Ekshakar Wraiths. The Wraiths moved like shadows, their stealth technology making them nearly impossible to detect until it was too late. They struck with surgical precision, taking out key leaders and soldiers in the blink of an eye. The resistance was overwhelmed, caught off guard by the brutal efficiency of the alien elite soldiers. Commander Lisa Chung, Dr. Samuel Carter, and a small group of survivors had managed to escape into a secure lower level of the facility. They were bruised, battered, but alive. Barely. The Wraiths had cut down most of their comrades, and the rest of the base was lost. But they weren't giving up. "We need to get to the upper levels," Lisa said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "If we can make it to the communications room, we can send a message to the other cells. We can't let this be the end." Dr. Carter, his face streaked with dirt and sweat, nodded. "If we can get the weapon back online, we might still have a chance. The Akshakar have no idea what we've developed. We can still turn the tide." But the path to the communications room was not an easy one. The Wraiths were closing in, systematically hunting down anyone they could find. Every hallway was a deadly game of cat and mouse, with the humans desperately trying to stay one step ahead of their pursuers. Lisa's mind raced, calculating their next move. There was no room for error. One wrong turn, one misstep, and it could all be over. As they moved deeper into the facility, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. The Wraiths were relentless, and they were playing for keeps. They had taken out the Resistance's leadership, and now they were hunting for any survivors to finish the job. Time was running out. They'd reached a junction, and Lisa signaled for the group to stop. She peered around the corner, her heart racing. "We're close," she whispered. "Just a little farther." But as she moved forward, a sudden noise made her freeze, a soft clicking sound. Then, out of the shadows, a Wraith appeared, its glowing red eyes locking onto her. In an instant, it lunged, moving faster than anything humanly possible. Lisa barely had time to react, drawing her sidearm and firing. The shot grazed the Wraith's shoulder, but it didn't slow down. Dr. Carter reacted first, throwing a makeshift explosive device at the Wraith. The blast sent it crashing to the ground, but Lisa knew it was only temporary. The Wraith would get back up, and they would be right back in the hunt. "We don't have time for this," Lisa said, gritting her teeth. "Move, now." They ran, pushing past the fallen Wraith and down the hallway toward the communications room. But as they turned a corner, more Wraiths appeared, blocking their path. Lisa's pulse quickened as she realized they were surrounded. There was no way out. "We're trapped," Dr. Carter said, his voice filled with dread. Lisa's mind raced. They couldn't fight their way out of this, not with the small force they had left. There was only one option left: sacrifice. "Take the weapon," Lisa said, turning to Dr. Carter. "I'll hold them off. You get that weapon online and send the message. Tell them we will not surrender." Dr. Carter looked at her in disbelief. "Lisa, no. There's no time. You're the one who can make a difference," she insisted, her voice filled with resolve. "Now go." With a final look, Dr. Carter nodded grimly and sprinted toward the communications room, while Lisa and the remaining survivors turned to face the oncoming Wraiths. As the Wraiths closed in, Lisa knew this might be her final stand, but she wasn't afraid. The Resistance had come too far, fought too hard, to give up now. Even if it meant her life, she would buy the others the time they needed to send a message that humanity would never bow to invaders. The Wraiths advanced, their weapons raised. Lisa took a deep breath, ready to fight to the end. She had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was their will to survive. Now, as the first shots rang out, she was about to prove just how far that will could go. The sound of gunfire and the eerie hum of alien technology filled the air as Lisa Chung and the last remnants of her team fought with everything they had. The Wraiths, unrelenting in their pursuit, closed in on them with deadly precision. But Lisa, her face set in a mask of determination, refused to back down. She fired round after round, each shot aimed with careful accuracy, but the Wraiths were too quick, too agile. For every Wraith that fell, two more seemed to take its place. Lisa's mind raced as she reloaded, trying to find any way out. She had given Dr. Carter the weapon and sent him to the communications room, knowing it was their only hope. If he could get that weapon online and broadcast the message, the Resistance might still have a chance. But as she fought, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that time was running out. The Wraiths were too close, and soon there would be no one left to carry the message. "Keep fighting," Lisa shouted to her team, though her voice was barely audible over the chaos. The remaining soldiers, though battered and outnumbered, fought with fierce resolve, knowing that every second they bought Dr. Carter was a second closer to a chance at victory. But then, a sudden explosion shook the ground beneath their feet. The walls of the facility trembled, and for a split second, the Wraiths faltered, their attention diverted. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. The blast had come from above, close, but not directly on them. Had Dr. Carter succeeded? Was the message sent? Before she could ponder further, the floor above them erupted in a shower of debris. From the smoke and dust, a silhouette emerged, huge, armored, and unmistakably human. The roar of engines echoed through the hall as a heavy armored transport crashed through the debris, its weapon systems glowing with power. "Get in," a voice shouted through the comm system, barely audible over the noise. Lisa's eyes widened as she recognized the voice. "Colonel Jansen," she gasped. Jansen, a decorated military leader from one of Earth's remaining strongholds, had been presumed dead after an early HFY strike on his division. Yet here he was, leading a fresh group of resistance fighters. The large transport vehicle, bristling with heavy firepower, had been modified with technology scavenged from the HFY's own fleet. This was humanity's new weapon, a chance at reclaiming what had been lost. "Move, now," Jansen barked as the transport fired up its engines, sending blasts of energy at the advancing Wraiths. The resistance fighters scrambled for cover, their weary bodies lifting with renewed purpose. Lisa didn't need any further encouragement. She gave a quick nod to her team, and they dashed toward the transport, under the cover of the vehicle's firepower. Behind them, the Wraiths, though fearsome, were forced to retreat, unable to withstand the firepower of the armored vehicle. But Lisa could feel the weight of the moment. As they boarded the transport, Jansen gave a curt nod to Lisa. "You did well, Commander. You've bought us the time we needed." "Has Carter sent the message?" Lisa asked, barely able to catch her breath. Jansen's face tightened. "We don't know yet, but we got a fleet inbound. We'll know soon enough. Stay with me." The transport lifted off, its engines roaring as it ascended out of the facility. As it flew over the mountains, Lisa glanced out the window, watching the devastation below. Earth had been brought to its knees, but humanity had not given up. The fight was far from over. Meanwhile, Dr. Carter was in the communications room, his fingers flying over the controls of the device he had worked so tirelessly to activate. The weapon, a hybrid of alien technology and human ingenuity, hummed with power. Carter's heart raced as he saw the data string flicker across the screen. He was almost there. The message was ready to go. But just as he was about to hit the final sequence, a sudden alarm blared. He looked up to see a Wraith standing in the doorway, its weapons raised. Without hesitation, Dr. Carter lunged for the device and activated the transmitter manually. To all human resistance forces, his voice crackled over the comm system. "This is Dr. Samuel Carter. The weapon is online. The fight is not over. We will rise. Earth will not fall." The message was sent. As the transmission blasted across the planet, it reached resistance cells all over Earth, reigniting the spark of defiance in every corner of the world. The HFY, though still powerful, were starting to realize that the planet they thought they had already conquered was not giving up without a fight. The HFY never anticipated the message would be received across the planet. When Dr. Carter's transmission blasted through their communication network, it shattered the false sense of victory they had built over weeks of relentless assault. Earth was not defeated. Earth was not broken. The message sent waves of shock through the alien forces, but for humanity, It was a rallying cry. Resistance cells around the world erupted in action. From the mountains of the Rockies to the urban sprawls of Europe and Asia, human fighters regrouped, fueled by the message of defiance. A wave of hope spread like wildfire. Earth's defenders were not alone. The fight had only just begun. Lisa Chung stood on the command deck of Colonel Jansen's transport, watching as fleets of resistance ships, newly outfitted with scavenged Shakar tech, lifted off from hidden bases across the globe. The planet's atmosphere shimmered with the silhouettes of humanity's fighters preparing to engage. The rebellion had reached a critical mass. "Colonel, how long until we make contact with their main fleet?" Lisa asked, her voice steadied despite the pounding of her heart. Jansen surveyed the radar, his expression grim but focused. "We've got about 3 hours before their reinforcements arrive. The question is whether we can stop them before they bring in their full force. Then we make them regret ever stepping foot on Earth," Lisa said. Her words were as much a promise as a battle cry. "We've learned their weaknesses. We've learned how to fight them. We can win this." Jansen nodded. "We'll give them everything we've got." As the ships gathered, the resistance leaders coordinated their final strategy. Their goal wasn't just to hold their ground, but to push the Shakar off Earth. They had the element of surprise, their ships armed with modified alien weapons, and the element of humanity's unyielding will. It was time to take the fight to the invaders. The first assault came swiftly. Human ships, armed with experimental plasma cannons and cloaking technology stolen from the Shakar, swooped in, catching the enemy off guard. The battle above Earth's atmosphere erupted like a storm. Explosions lit the sky as ships collided in a deadly dance. Humanity's fighters now an unstoppable force. The Shakar, despite their advanced technology, were thrown into disarray as the resistance capitalized on their mistakes and weaknesses. On the ground, the situation was no less intense. The Wraiths, realizing that they had underestimated Earth's resilience, began ramping up their attacks. Entire cities were under siege once again, but the resistance wasn't retreating this time. Guerrilla fighters emerged from the shadows, attacking supply lines and outposts. Cities that had fallen to the invaders rose once more, humanity reclaiming what had been lost. In the heart of the battlefield, Lisa led a squad of resistance soldiers toward the Shakar's main command station, a massive structure of alien design that had been established in the ruins of Washington, D.C. Their objective was simple: destroy it and cripple the invaders' ability to coordinate. As they approached the station, the air buzzed with tension. The Shakar soldiers were everywhere, their once overconfident posture now replaced by urgency. They had realized the situation was dire. The resistance was no longer a scattered nuisance. They were a force to be reckoned with. Lisa's team stormed the compound, firing on all cylinders. Alien forces swarmed, but the humans fought with unmatched determination. Every inch of the ground was hard-won. Lisa knew this was their final shot at breaking the invaders' grip on Earth. The command center, a towering monolith, was in sight. "Push forward. Don't stop," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. With a final push, they reached the heart of the command center, planting explosives at key points. As the charges went off, the building shook violently, and alarms screamed through the air. The command center began to crumble. The Shakar, in a last-ditch effort to maintain control, unleashed their most powerful weapons. A massive blast of energy shot from their central reactor, but it was too late. The explosion from the detonated charges caused a chain reaction, destabilizing the entire structure. The Shakar forces inside were overwhelmed, their command structure fractured. Lisa and her team barely made it out in time, racing through the wreckage. Behind them, the command center collapsed, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The resistance had done it. They had struck a decisive blow. As the final remnants of the Shakar forces scattered, humanity stood victorious. Earth was not defeated, and the invaders, despite their technological superiority, had been pushed to the brink of retreat. The fight was far from over, but the HFY would never forget the lesson they had learned on Earth. Humanity, when cornered, would rise, and they would fight to the death.